Good evening. My name is Bob Liff, and this is the CUNY Forum, a monthly town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with faculty and students of the Edward T. Rogowski Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. The lifeblood of this or any other metropolitan area is the ability of people and commerce to move freely through the streets and highways. In Manhattan, the congested heart of our region, that traffic is subject to blockages by trucks, cabs, double parked cars, pedestrians, horses, constructions, bicycles, and a personal pet peeve, movie companies taking all the parking places in residential neighborhoods, but that's a story for another day. Mayor Bloomberg's office estimated that traffic congestion and disruption cost the city as much as $13 billion a year in economic activity, translating into upwards of 50,000 jobs. The mayor's groundbreaking Plan NYC study looking ahead to the city in the year 2030 includes a commitment to improving our environment, in part by cutting the number of vehicles pouring into Manhattan each day and cutting the amount of pollutants all those gridlocked vehicles spew into our air. A centerpiece of his plan, or at least the one that has generated the most controversy, is the proposal to implement a congestion pricing plan that would charge drivers of cars $8 a day and trucks $21 a day to drive into Manhattan below 86th Street. The plan, the one incidentally the mayor said was not on the table during his 2005 re-election campaign, would have New York follow the example set by major cities on 3 continents: Singapore, Seoul, Bogota, Stockholm, and most prominently London, which have looked to congestion pricing to maintain the viability of their central business districts. While the mayor deserves praise for forcing such a central debate on our city, the devil, as always, is in the details. Will the plan simply divert traffic to poorer neighborhoods already struggling with exhaust-fed asthma epidemics? Will it create new parking nightmares just north of 86th Street and near subway stops in the other boroughs? Is it fair to add a daily tax on the already burdensome regimens imposed on small businesses that depend on daily deliveries into the affected zone? We're joined tonight by 4 New Yorkers taking an active part in that debate. Martin Golden is a Republican state senator who represents southwestern Brooklyn from Bay Ridge to Marine Park. Democratic State Senator Liz Krueger represents Manhattan's East Side, which would be directly affected by the current pricing plan. Robert Sinclair is the manager of media relations for AAA, the American Automobile Association of New York, and Cynthia Chen is professor in the Department of Civil Engineering at City Colleges, who specializes in the study of transportation issues. Marty Golden, let me start with you. You support the mayor's plan. Why is that?
Well, I support it in a lot of its detail, but I'm still reserved on some of the decisions that are about to be made. And I want to see what happens at the legislative process and how that comes through the city council and through my colleagues in the assembly and the Senate and with the governor and how we come to a conclusion on this. I think it's for CUNY. I want to thank you, Bob, for hosting this show, and I want to thank CUNY for putting this show together. For CUNY, this has got to be a really sensational. You got to talk anybody who's in urban planning or policy and transportation. This is all of it put into one. And housing. Housing is a big issue in our city. And if you take a look at this plan, 127 different proposals that are in the New York plan is very, very good. I live in the southern part of Brooklyn, and it takes, I don't know, forever to get into Manhattan. And I believe that we need new transportation alternatives to be able to get our people in and out of the city of New York, whether you live in Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, the Bronx, upstate New York, New Jersey, wherever you live, you have to find alternative ways of getting into the city. And I believe the plan puts a whole host of different alternatives to use. One, it increases headways on our trains, it increases express buses, it puts additional express bus routes out, additional train routes, puts out ferry services. We underutilize our water system here in this city, and we should use it more effectively. And I believe the ferry services that will be offered will enhance the ability to get in and out of the city. Those are just some of the transportation alternatives that would be used. It gives us 1 million new housing units. It puts new parks, new trees. It gives us opportunities that this city would not have if we didn't take a look at this entire plan in its entirety and at least give it a shot to move forward. I think the mayor is a forward thinker. It is something that's already going on in England and other parts of the world, and it is working. And it's not new to us. This is something that's been kicked around here for the past 15 or 20 years or so, this congestive pricing and off-peak hours, and bringing our trucks into the city at night, letting them do their unloading, and getting those trucks out of the city during the day so that we can have more availability for our vehicles in the city and more availability for our bikes and our transportation, our buses. This is something that's been kicked around for a long period of time. Also kicked around for a long period of time is putting tolls on our East River bridges, which would give us additional dollars for our infrastructure and for transportation. So whatever plan comes out, I believe you're going to see enhancements on the East River bridges so that we can start to pay and to afford for our infrastructure, to bring down the cost of our MTA. Here we have an MTA increase coming up, an unjustified MTA increase coming up, and I believe we have to find alternatives of keeping that price down so that we give alternatives to the people of the city of New York to get in and get out of the city with a reasonable dollar and to be able to go to school, go to work, and live in this good city. And I think this program allots for that. There's so much more, but I don't want to take up the whole show here in my opening. But
Liz,
thank you.
Let me turn to Senator Krueger. You represent the area south of 86th Street. We're actually we're actually sitting in your district now.
Right.
The devil is in the details.
Yes, it is.
And I know you also respect the mayor for putting this plan forward, but have questions. What kinds of questions?
Well, as Senator Senator Golden just said, he laid out a plan that the mayor put out there called Plan 2030, which has a long laundry list of really excellent ideas for the city of New York in the future. And the theme of it is a greener New York, a sustainable New York, a cleaner New York. We all want that. We all need that. But when you're a legislator and you're being asked to vote on a specific plan, you really have to evaluate the details. So for me, representing a district that is so congested right here in Murray Hill that certain hours of the day, I have senior citizens and women with children in strollers who can't cross the streets because there's gridlock constantly. So I know that I need fewer cars traveling in Manhattan. I know that we need increased mass transit, all these buses that were mentioned, expanded public transportation in trains and in subways. But the devil in the details for me is, where is the money that's going to expand the bus service, that's going to roll out bus rapid transit throughout the city of New York, that's going to increase the trains and the subways so that people have alternatives. It's not enough to just say we're going to make it tougher for people to drive in Manhattan. We've got to make sure that we have alternatives. So one of the big issues for me in my district is the Second Avenue subway. I've been a strong advocate for the Second Avenue subway. We're putting a hole in the ground right now at 93rd and 2nd, but it's going to take till 2030 under the current plan to have a Second Avenue subway running full length. We can't put any more people on the Lexington Avenue line. It's impossible. Students are shaking their heads because you've tried to get on the Lexington Avenue line to get here to the CUNY Graduate Center. So for me, it's all about the proof in the pudding. Where is the money going to be invested in expanding buses, trains, and speeding up the process for a Second Avenue subway and expanded service on our other lines? Otherwise, we will say we did congestion pricing, and we will then live with the chaos that comes out of not having gotten the details right. So that's what I'm focused on.
Professor Chen, people who do drive into the city are going to see something totally different if this plan goes into effect. How are they going to react? I mean, you've studied kind of drivers' behavior. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you expect to see?
Yes, that's $1 million question that I don't have a definite answer to. How will people react exactly? But looking at past studies, we've seen different reactions. And first of all, people will first try to make some short-term adjustments. So they could, people could just pay up and save some travel time, or people could change their time of day travel choices, and so they choose a different time of day, or people could make other arrangements, for example, cancel the trip or have someone else do the trip. In the long term, some people could even make home relocation decisions or job relocation decisions. So these are the range of decisions that we are seeing. Now, this congestion pricing thing in New York is very unique in some aspects, because this is the largest scale within the United States for congestion pricing. And the closest one will be probably the London example. But even the London example, in terms of the population density and job density, the New York cities have much higher job density and population density. So, so we, as academics, we are very excited about the plan, and we are waiting for all the answers. I think we are really looking for to do a rigorous analysis and to see what are the reactions and some of the questions that can be some of the questions raised by Senator Krueger that we also want to see the answers to that.
Mr. Sinclair, you've heard from a lot of members of AAA, and you all have taken a look at it, and frankly, you don't think it works very well.
Not as currently constituted. Everyone keeps talking about London as the exemplar in all this, and you have to realize that when congestion pricing first started in London, it was the equivalent, I believe, of $10, £5. From the beginning, it wasn't making enough money and not having a strong enough effect, so they raised the fee to £8, the equivalent of $16. So we think that the plan is too watered down as currently constituted to really have a strong effect. There will be exemptions for taxis and the black limousines, the so-called black cars. It's estimated that they make up 30 to 40% of the traffic in the area. In London, they are charged one time, but they are charged. We think that there are alternatives that would make it work better. We also think that some of the arguments that have been floated as reasons to do this just won't work. The pollution idea, the idea that you're going to cut pollution. Well, the mayor's office itself back in April issued a report and said that 79% of the pollution in New York City comes from all the buildings, nearly 1 million buildings in the city, and yet nothing's being done about that. But yet, if you're looking to the automobile, only 21% of the pollution problem as trying to solve the problem. We think that traffic would be shifted to the outer boroughs and create traffic problems there. And even according to the studies that have been done, congestion pricing would only result in an increase in traffic speed of 0.6 of 1 mile per hour in driving the affected zone. So really, is that a significant enough benefit to make this imposition on people from the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens? And most of the people that are driving to Manhattan are coming from Queens, and where the average income is $43,000 a year, and you're going to charge them $8. We think it serves as a regressive tax, and it's going to unfairly burden the people there. And that there are lots of alternatives that need to be looked at in order to do some sort of mitigation. Everybody's talking about the fact that this plan needs to get done so that we can get the money for mass transit, which is great. You know, the federal government is offering over $300 million for mass transit if you get some sort of mitigation plan. But it does not have to be congestion pricing. And the idea is, well, let's try it. And a lot of people aren't realizing that in order to try it, you're going to have to buy a lot of very expensive technology, 200 or 300 cameras that are costing $395,000 each. I mean, imagine how many traffic agents that would pay for and people that could manage traffic better. So for a lot of reasons, one very important one, the fact that there's been no environmental impact statement. You know, the pollution argument is a strong one, but where's the data to prove it? You can't do anything in this city, state, or country without an environmental impact statement, yet it's being poo-pooed in this idea. So there are a lot of things to be looked at. You know, we are reserved in our criticism of the plan because we believe in an intermodal approach to transportation, that subways and buses are a good thing. East Side access for the Long Island Railroad is good. Second Avenue subway is good. But we don't think that it will really work. A lot of people aren't talking about the fact also that 41% of the money that's collected in London through the congestion pricing plan goes into the administration of the plan. So the idea that there's going to be $1 billion a year, $600 million a year, $400 million a year to go from this plan and support mass transit, we think is a dubious one. On top of all those things, how about the fact that the motorist continues to take it on the chin and pay for things that they aren't getting their full share for? There is a sales tax on gasoline in New York State, one of only 8 states in the country that has a sales tax on gasoline. The revenue is over $2 billion a year. None of the money goes to motorist-related issues. A third of the $1.2 billion collected on intra-city tunnels and bridges goes to support mass transit. When you get on the subway, you're only paying 60, or as the Daily News reported, 68% of the ride. So time and time again, the motorist takes it on the chin. The State Advisory Panel for Transportation Policy for 2025 in 2005 issued a report, and it said that a third of the lane miles in our state are in fair or poor condition. It said 1/3 of the bridges are structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. So the motorist is paying for all of this. There's a dedicated highway fund that's $46 billion in debt, money being taken from motor vehicle registration fees and license fees that is not being used for the purpose that it was intended. So another shot to the jaw of the motorist, and we think it would be very unfair.
Everybody can just join in now. Is there one of the questions that I've heard about in my discussions about the plan? I went to a couple of the hearings that are being held. Is the concern that if you in fact put a charge on somebody coming into a part of the city, are you kind of are you in essence putting some kind of a are you dividing the city in that way? Staten Island has always made that complaint that they have to spend money on a toll in order to get to the rest of the city. Does that cause you some concern that all of a sudden you're going to have to pay to go to a part of your city?
Well, actually, under the plan the mayor laid out, even if you live in this part of the city, you'll pay the fee.
And you'll have to pay if you drive out.
You have to pay to drive in the district if you live in the district, and you'll have to pay to leave the district or to come back to the district, depending on whether you do it in the same day. So at that level, there's an equity in the sense that everybody has to pay. Although I'll tell you, there are people in my district who are very disturbed that they're being asked to pay to drive around their own neighborhoods. And I would make the argument that this is going to be a new cost for anyone who gets in vehicles, but we have to look at the larger picture of what are the long-term right answers for the city of New York. And with all due respect to my colleague from the AAA, the answer for New York City is not more people in cars. The answer for New York City is fewer people in cars.
That's exactly right.
It is
Where are they going to go?
increasing subway and bus and rail options because we can't have this many cars in the city of New York.
To my colleague and to Mr. Sinclair, we're in the year 2007. If anybody believes that technology is not coming to the city of New York, those cameras are coming. It's just a matter of time. And they're going to be here either this year or next year or the year after. You can't move in this city. I was just in Murray Hill, and I explained not too long ago at another event that we were at how it took me 40 minutes to get 6 blocks. And I had an important meeting. You just cannot take your vehicle. I had no choice. I was coming in from Albany, so I came down from Albany, came through the city, and I got gridlocked in the city. And we're not even moving into the holidays. Forget about when the holidays come. It's just a disaster here in the city trying to get through it. And this would impact, and we talk about dollars. The dollars are there. You're going to see dollars that we're talking about $500 million to $600 million that would be available. We'd be able to bond against this 2030. And I know you're going to go against bonding as well. But I'm going to tell you right now, you're talking about infrastructure. You need to rebuild your infrastructure. You need to have a better MTA service for the people to get around the city and to live in the city. You need housing. You need to be able to open up our spaces here. Do you know we can't have freeways? You know why? Because we don't pass the admissions test in the federal government. That's why there's no freeways. But there's never been a freeway in the city. You always pay in the city. There's never going to be a freeway in the city because of the emissions. We can reduce them by 30% here in this city, and I believe that's a real number. And I think that we can work together to achieve those goals. It's coming. It's a matter of time. It's either going to be the plan that we're discussing here today, or it's going to be tolls on the East River bridges, but it's going to be some mitigation so that we can have these dollars so that we can improve on the infrastructure here in the city of New York. It has to happen.
The idea that something needs to be done is accurate, but where all these extra people that are abandoning their cars will go remains to be seen. The comptroller of City of New York, Bill Thompson, earlier this year released a report and says that the subway is already overstressed as far as safety and reliability is concerned. The idea that you might say the plan is wildly successful and you're going to throw an extra 40 or 400,000 people into the subway, it just won't work.
By improving headways. You've got to improve headways and the Second Avenue line.
The subway is going to be there as an alternative. We've already acknowledged that it's going to take till 2030 to do the Second Avenue subway. So where's the near-term alternative that's going to exist as far as the subway is concerned?
But that's where, I mean, in the shorter term, according to the plans, a lot of those people are diverted into a vastly expanded bus fleet and the bus rapid transit. So it's not being totally. I mean, I've always thought that, the MTA, for instance, has cut out a lot of its stops. The Long Island Railroad eliminated a lot of its stops all throughout Queens.
We're going to have express trains coming in.
They didn't get enough business. That's absolutely counterproductive to what they're trying to do. So I mean, you do have no
Before we go to questions here with the audience, it's important to point out you said 43% of the people come from Queens. You got to remember that a lot of people coming from Queens are coming from Long Island, and they are parking in Queens and coming across into the city of New York. So you can't use that number. If you take a look at the numbers across the city, people like Southwest Brooklyn, I get 7% of the people that come from my district go into the city of New York. That's the numbers that we have, 7%. And you know what? Out of that 7%, 3 to 4% of them already use the Battery Tunnel and pay $8. So they're already exempt from this program because they're already paying $8 to get into the city. So I'm impacting a 4%, and I'm hoping to get some of that 4% into the ferries, into the express buses, new express lines coming through my district, and expanded headways on my train system so that we can get people in and out of the city quicker.
You bring up another reason why we don't think it'll work. You're going to exempt the people that are paying tolls. They won't have to pay the full congestion price, so you're further watering down something that's
it's already taken into consideration. It's already taken into consideration.
Listen,
and here,
I live in Southeast Queens, Community Board 13, and studies have shown from the State Department of Transportation that is where the greatest number of people come from. There is no mass transit alternative. Now, bus rapid transit would probably work in our area,
we got to increase
but there are going to be problems that come with that.
And you're right, Southeast Queens is really suffering from too little mass transit.
Absolutely.
And I would argue that any congestion pricing plan has to address the fact that Southeast Queens in particular gets underutilized by mass transit.
And
we have to do more. The same is true that we have to make sure that the people in Long Island and Westchester actually have someplace to park their car by their train stations
and Jersey.
In their towns, because otherwise they aren't going to get on the trains because they'll have no way to do so.
I think your district would be negatively impacted. People are going to drive to Brooklyn and park their cars there.
Not true.
What's going to happen?
They'd have to come out of Verrazano and pay that crazy toll. So I'm not
going to be.
I am not going to be too impacted.
Well,
I don't have Staten Island. I think Staten Island has a separate set of issues that they're going to deal, and they're similar to Southeast Queens, and you're going to have to deal with them separately. And that's additional ferry services, additional express bus services, creating the rail service that they have there, enhancing that rail service, and working with Staten Island. Staten Island's going to be impacted, and my colleagues are working to make sure that they get the best possible plan for Staten Island that makes it work. I want to read quickly this paragraph. The city needs a new approach to financing transportation. Under the new Surface Transportation Authority that the Mayor's Management Advisory Task Force is weighing, electronic scanning would be used to collect tolls on 12 toll-free East River bridges, Harlem River bridges, and more than $600 million would be raised each year after expenses to the Triborough Bridge rates, if Triborough Bridge rates were used. When do you think that was said?
Can't imagine. Maybe 20 or 30 years ago?
This was a New York Times editorial, What's Fair is a Fair, F-A-R-E, and it was done by Roger Altman and Donald Comerfield, who were Mayor David Dinkins' Management Advisory Task Force in 1991. This idea has been floating for years because of the need to repair our infrastructure, and I think the time has come for us to get into the debate, which we're in, and to look at the details, as Senator Kruger has pointed out, and to map out where the details work and where they don't work, and to try to better the plan so that it enhances the city of New York.
Let's make sure that infrastructure includes the roads, because you cannot forget that New York City is part of the Northeast Corridor. And it's estimated that maybe 30% of the traffic going into Manhattan is through traffic. People are merely passing through. If you're going to anywhere in the Northeast and you're coming from the West, more than likely going to use the George Washington Bridge or some other tunnel or bridge coming into Manhattan and then going into Queens or Brooklyn and up through the Bronx to the rest of the Northeast. By sacrificing money for motorist-related issues, you're leaving us in a very vulnerable position as far as our road infrastructure is concerned.
It's already included in the plan to make sure those
passing. Why aren't we building anything? We need a new Gowanus Expressway. We need a new Brooklyn-Queens Expressway.
No disagreement here. We are 100% with you on that.
Cross-Bronx Expressway.
But
nobody's talking about that. Talking about subway. What about roads?
But when you talk about through traffic, just to give a sense of how incredibly interrelated all these issues are, one-way tolls on the Verrazano Bridge led people to drive through
59th Street across Manhattan
to drive across Manhattan in order to avoid that toll.
Exactly.
And so, one of the arguments is to put back on the two-way tolls in Staten Island, which is a third rail issue in Staten Island.
Well, today's technology, let's be fair, you can go through, I come through the Outer Bridge and the Goethals Bridge, you can come through those bridges at 30 miles, 40 miles an hour and still be recorded. So I think what we have to be able to do is we have to catch up with technology, and we have to be able, some of our cars and some of our passengers in the vehicles, not the vehicles, but the people living in our communities don't apply for these MTA, what do you call them?
Easy
passes. And I think that's what has to happen. We have to become and somehow enhance more people taking advantage of these easy passes so that we can expedite traffic through these key points. I'm telling you right now, I go through the outer bridge. My biggest problem is getting through Staten Island, but because the Staten Island it has a terrible, terrible traffic congestion problem, as does the rest of the city. I mean, that's the I don't have to tell you about the rest of the city on its outer roadways. They're a disaster, and this is one of the ways to deal with it.
And since we're talking about 1 million more people by 2030, and that's the projection, even taking into account your concerns about making sure that the roads we have are in good repair and are 21st century models, you can't put another 1 million people on the roads in the 5 boroughs. You've got to talk about expanding your infrastructure for mass transit. And following up on the technology point, when I met with the MTA yesterday, between Metro cards and Easy Passes, the possibilities for doing off-peak pricing to also encourage behavior change, as the professor was discussing earlier, can do an enormous amount to help us plan better for when people are on our roads and when people are on our mass transit.
We already have off-peak on the Port Authority
Correct.
crossings, I believe.
Yes.
I mean,
what effect does it have?
Does that have an effect, or are people tied to their work schedules and are not as flexible?
I think that really depends on people's characteristic. And so in past studies, for example, we found people with higher income, more flexible schedules are more willing to respond, and men are more willing to pay up than women. And people with fixed schedule and with low income are more willing to change to other alternative modes. And so that really depends on what demographics and we are seeing. So I think that's why that we generally support the congestion pricing or that proposal championed by the mayor, and we just want to see that more rigorous analysis, and we want to do more analysis, and we also want to see that when people cannot change or cannot pay up to the price, they have an alternative to turn to.
No, it's one of the things that's always struck me that has not gotten a lot of attention is the idea of charging trucks $21 a day to drive into the zone. And it's one thing to talk about through trucks, and there are tens of thousands of through trucks
Every day.
every single day in this city. But this is in essence, it seems to me, a tax on small businesses, that there's a lot of small businesses that have to make deliveries into Manhattan. And, you know, I mean, God knows they get tickets every day. There's even this formalized process for lowering the ticket by going to the Department of Finance.
90% of our freight comes through the George Washington Bridge. 90% of our freight. If anything happened to the George Washington Bridge, we'd have to fly food into New York City. That's number one. Number two, I think, agree, I'm not sure, but on a rail freight. We need a rail freight coming into the city of New York through Jersey, that we can bring that freight into the city without takes trucks
Nadler
off.
has been talking about for decades.
I think it's a great idea. It's a that's exactly right, and they're in a position now, hopefully, to make this happen. I think it should happen.
You mentioned the fact that New York is out of compliance with EPA regulations as far as pollution is
Correct.
concerned. It's not volatile organic compounds, which are the emissions from automobiles. It's particulate emission, which is a big word for soot. The combustion process in diesel trucks releases soot. So it's the inordinate amount of trucks that we have on the road in our area because of the lack of a rail freight tunnel. Build that tunnel. Watch how many trucks disappear. How do you think congestion will be affected? Will go down a whole lot. Talk about infrastructure.
I think it could add to it.
How about that piece?
I think you still need. I think you still need the plan 2030. I think that tunnel would aid and abet the city of New York for future. And I believe that having 90% of your freight for homeland security purposes makes no sense to have all that freight coming over one bridge. So I think, from that point of view, we should open up that and have that conversation.
Just to give an example of the impact of this particular need for a tunnel. Right now, if you want to ship by rail from Queens to New Jersey, you have to go up to a town called Selkirk, I think it is, which is up near Albany, in order to have a rail connection across the Hudson. Right. And and the Port Authority of New York, what was then the Port Authority of New York, was created in order in 1923 or something to build a rail tunnel, which is still not been built. I'm gonna go to some questions. Tell us your name and your campus and speak up, please.
Hi, my name is Daniel Kane. I'm from College of Staten Island. Now, you've touched on the MTA a little bit. You're saying that we need expansion in the trains and bus systems. But what's to stop the MTA from hiking up their prices? Right now, the express bus is $5. They're going to come back and counter, well, we could raise it to $6.50. You know, it's going to cost the average person to drive in $8. Now the express bus is $6.50. Or they raised the train system up to $2.50, $3 during peak. Why? Because now you're going to need more trains. What stops them from doing that, and why shouldn't the MTA help fund this new program?
Well, I mean, I think that this new program is going to fund the MTA. I think
That's correct.
I think you have it somewhat reversed, but I mean,
But he's got a good point.
I mean, when you say what's going to stop them, that's what elected officials are.
We're on the same page, I think, when it comes to this MTA hike that's about to take place. It's unjustified, and there's no reason for it to take place today, but yet the governor is insisting that this fare hike go into place immediately. I think it's wrong. I think that we have to have more public hearing, and I agree with you. There should be a way to deal with the MTA and knowing what future costs will be. I don't know how to do that. I mean, we're good, but we're not that good. I can guarantee you, though, that everything in this world is going to go up. It's up to us as elected officials, as those that you put into elected responsibilities, that we deal with this governor and we deal with the legislature in a responsible way and make sure that the impact is as minimal as possible, and that impact is in fact needed. Right now we don't justify. We don't believe it's needed.
It also means that the state government needs to invest our share in the MTA. I believe that the state of New York hasn't invested enough in both the capital infrastructure needs of the MTA or the operating costs. And so while I share my colleague's view that a fare hike should be the last thing we do, we still have time in this next budget process to commit, I hope, several $100 million to the MTA, which will counter the need for such a large fare hike. And I hope that both sides of the aisle will agree on that. Because
we have a hearing going on.
New York City usually gets short shrift on subsidies for the MTA.
Of the authority structure. The MTA, we sued the MTA back in 2003 when they raised the tolls, saying that there was a $1 billion deficit when in fact they had a surplus of nearly $700 million. The federal judge in that case, or the state judge, whatever level of court it was, said that the MTA was untrammeled in its arrogance in sending through that toll increase. The authority structure was created back during the Depression in order to get projects done rapidly without a whole lot of oversight. It's up to the state legislature to reform the MTA rather than attempting to work with something.
And the new governor has changed all of the administration of the MTA, so I'm hoping that we won't have those same
Mr. Sinclair,
problems.
you've seen, hopefully, the state Senate's reform bill, and hopefully we can get the state assembly to go along with that reform bill. There are over 100 different authorities that spend offline over $100 billion in this state.
We spend no oversight.
Offline $100 billion. In other words, we have online $124 billion budget, and we have an offline budget of another $100 billion in the state of New York through over 100 authorities that have no reform, that need reform, that we've been trying to get.
We will work with you to get that done.
And we're going to go to another question, but in fact, those authorities, to give you a sense of the cyclical nature of politics and government, were created to remove them from the day-to-day political influence that had and it's one of those points at which you have to reform the reforms. Eddie Kostikian, a former deputy mayor, very kind of a wise old head in this city, always said after every 40 years you have to reform the reforms. Just go back to what you used to have, because they become so institutionalized and calcified and non-responsive over time that you need to kind of throw the baby and the bathwater out and start again. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi. My name is Munir, and I go to Queens College. Well, my question is, it's a bit technical. How many trains can you possibly add to the platform? I mean, on the tracks. I mean, I feel as if during rush hour, there are usually like trains that come after 2 minutes. Like all you have to do is wait 2 minutes and the train will be there. But how many more trains could you possibly get on the track?
In fact, the way I understand it is that a lot of the signal work is the automated signal work precisely allows you to have a much shorter headway between trains. You know, when you had the mechanical signals, you might have had to wait 5 minutes, and then you have to wait 4 minutes and 3 minutes.
I think to his question, it depends on what station. If you're on a station that has several lines coming into it, it appears that there are trains coming through every 2 minutes, and there might well be in those busy intersections or those busy transfer stations within the MTA system. But I can tell you right now, we have the R train, which is rarely, the N train, which stands for never, the W, which stands for wrong. These are trains that we have plenty of room for improvement and headway, and I think that's what we're looking to get is more headway.
And it varies by train line. I represent the Lexington Avenue line. I am told that without a complete redo of the signal system, there's literally no additional trains that you could put on the Lex line, the busiest line in the world. But we just learned the MTA's announced increased trains on the 7 line. And so they believe that they can add there. And I must admit, we talk about the N and the R the same way. We don't have the W that gets to us. Certainly there's better we could do there.
Oh, there's a lot better.
We calculated that roughly, if we assume like 20% of the car trips to be converted to trips, the transit trips, and we calculated roughly about 1,000 cars to be added onto the subway system, which is manageable in the current system, and also given that the MTA is going through a technology upgrade, which is going to upgrade their communication system, so it's going to increase the frequency of the cars.
And the capacity.
And the capacity,
obviously,
right.
If you increase the number of cars, you shorten the headway, you have a greater capacity to carry people. So, yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Francesca Tessier. I attend John Jay College of Criminal Justice. My question is, has anyone did a case study of why people drive into the city? As for myself, I live in Queens Village. It's a 2-hour mass transit commute versus driving, which is a 30-minute commute. So does anyone did a case study of why people actually drive into the city? Second question, in comparison to this new plan, did anyone take in consideration how the governor's changing regulations of issuing licenses and how this would also affect the plan?
Let's leave the license question alone.
That's only about 50,000 more cars coming into the city of New York. About 50,000 more cars.
That may be our next. That may be our next show.
You and I live in the same community board, and the people from our area drive very simply because it's more convenient. Many of them have to get to work at 7 a.m. and because of whatever situation, it's just not as convenient to stand out on a bus stop at that hour. If you get to work at 7, and you have to leave Southeast Queens at probably 5. So imagine standing on a bus stop, riding the subway at those hours. It's far more convenient. It's safer for a person to get in a car. A lot of people are coming into Manhattan by their cars for medical treatment. There are a lot of very major medical institutions that have procedures that aren't available anywhere else in the city, so they have to come in for that purpose. There are those who are craftsmen or what have you who have to carry tools and samples for salespeople, and that's why they want to drive. So the convenience, the necessity, in essence, is the reason why a lot of people choose to drive rather than ride mass transit, especially at those hours.
Mr. Sinclair, I got to come back at you just for 1 second. It's not that they come here because to the city of New York because they do services here that are not in the other boroughs. It's that's unfortunate that our hospitals do have these services, and unfortunately people choose not to use the hospitals in the outer boroughs. They have to. It's up to the hospitals to start selling to the communities that they do, in fact, do as good a job as that in Manhattan and try to get more of the people in the city of New York to use their out-of-borough hospitals. We have great hospitals around this city, and they're not getting a fair shake. And I do believe a number of people do come into the city to use the hospitals, but believe me, at the numbers that we're talking about, it's minuscule. Minuscule to the numbers we're talking about.
People who are talking about 2-hour commutes versus a 2-hour public. Obviously, if there's a bus rapid transit edition, hopefully you could get an express bus into
Ferries would be great.
where she was. You can't take a ferry.
Ferries would be
a ferry
wonderful.
from her neighborhood unless you're going to drive to the water. But I mean, are those the kind of choices people make?
Yes, I think I generally agree with Mr. Sinclair was saying that what we found. I also agree with you as well. Let me come back to you, but
I agree with everybody.
I'm sure. So what we found that travel time and travel costs are two most important factors affecting people's mode choice. And so yes, many of us choose to drive because driving is more convenient and it's shorter and it's less expensive. But on the other hand, we also found that in addition to travel time and travel cost, that there are other factors that could affect people's people's mode choice decision as well. For example, maybe people are not using the hospital programs here because people are not very not aware of it. So information, awareness, level of comfort, and many other factors as well. And we also found that people make more choices based on it's mostly a habit choice. And so many people make choices that don't, without going through a very deliberate decision-making process or comparing the costs and the benefits. And so people could be making a driving choice without recognizing, actually, hey, taking a public transit could be a much better choice on the other hand.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. My name is Leonora Girardi. I go to York College in Jamaica. My major is political science, and my minor is environmental. So a lot of you pose a lot of very valid points, and the thing that makes me curious the most is for this woman here. I'm sorry, I didn't catch her name.
Professor Chen.
Okay, Professor Chen. How can you seriously propose a change in behavior when there are other factors that will remain the same? Like, for instance, this may sound odd, okay, but I'm pro for this, so I have to propose this thought. Congress works a 4-day week, okay? I'm fortunate enough, I work a 4-day week. Possibly, if you can encourage employers to change schedules, to open windows of flexibility, so that people wouldn't have to drive in as much, put the burden on the other entities, and possibly, you know, figure out the cost across the board and allocate your money in a better manner.
You're raising a very important point, which is to show the degree to which this kind of an issue, a transportation issue. Senator Golden made the point when he opened up how this issue brings together so many areas of public concern and planning, is precisely where this affects how people work, how they get their health care, how they go to school. This is an issue that is the lifeblood. How you move people and commerce through the city is, in fact, the lifeblood. I think it's a very important point. One of the points we didn't get into, and I think this would affect your district, and also to some degree I won't say outer boroughs, being a Brooklyn boy, the other boroughs, that the idea of having residential parking permits in order to avoid people, in fact, who do want to drive to the transit hubs. You know, I live uptown now. I live up on 112th Street. People who may want to come near my stop, or they may want to go to stops in Brooklyn or Queens and eat up all the parking. Now, you know, there's nothing like in New York that's more important than parking.
That's been discussed in the plan.
So, I mean, in the plan, they're discussing...
It's another one of those details or devils that we need to figure out.
It's in the plan. And
a proposal for it, but we don't have the details of it. And to follow up on the woman's point about the role of employers and businesses in affecting our commuting patterns, of course, if you've got employers who are willing to adjust the hours of the day or able to. The studies that grew into the congestion pricing plan document that a significant number of employers in lower Manhattan actually pay the parking fees for their employees. So when the person's making an individual decision, can I take public transportation? Do I have public transportation available? They factor that against the fact that their employer will pay for their parking. So you have to see the role of employers in this whole exercise.
But you also have the employer that is paying some of the employees today to stay at home and are looking at the 4-day week. And again, where are we getting that from? Again, we're taking that out of Europe. These are all ideas that have been in practice in Europe for years, and it's something that we unfortunately have not been that much ahead on. Many of our corporations are looking at it across the country, but have not delved into it, and they should. Here in the city of New York, it's an easy place for us to go to a 4-day week and still get a 35-hour week or a 32 or 34-hour week that would justify the paycheck and justify the company doing it.
Businesses are getting major tax breaks to stay in the city. It would seem that having had that sort of break, that they would then make some sort of plan where they could help alleviate the situation by going to a 4-day work week or having telecommuting. Merrill Lynch is now looking for an incentive to stay in the city. They're supposed to be moving from Lower Manhattan to a building that's going to be built across the street from Madison Square Garden, and they want the same kind of break that the Pataki administration gave to, I think, Goldman Sachs. Yes, a couple of years ago. Now, if you're going to get those kind of huge breaks, to be a business in the city, then they need to contribute as well.
They get
by
those
having
breaks
some
because
sort
of the
thing.
economic
They
conditions
get
that
it
they
because
bring
of
to the city.
maintaining jobs, growing
Correct.
jobs, energy conservation. So there's a range of
It's
issues.
their
Going back to
employees that
Mrs.
have those jobs that are driving in.
Going back to Mr. Girardi's question here, I believe that we're talking about 1 million new people coming here in the city of New York over the next 15-year period. So even going to a 4-day week, even going to this plan that we're talking about, Plan 2030, a lot of this has to take place for this city to be able to exist and to move into the future. Right now, if we take a look at what's going to happen here, just housing alone, the cost of housing is driving many of our people out of this city. This plan takes into consideration $7 billion for 1 million new units. That is something that we have to look at seriously. And it's going after our contaminated lands, our waterfronts, and building those areas up that we have along the areas of Brooklyn and Bronx and Queens, and trying to increase opportunity with open space, housing, and economic conditions as well. So it's something that has to be planned for, and I'm saying urban planners here and policy planners. This is a great, great opportunity for the college, the CUNY College, and our colleges across the city to start to get into this discussion and start to have these different forums and let your voice be heard. And I believe that at the end of the day, we will have a good plan working with our legislators and our partners.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening. My name's Angelica. I'm from Queens College. And my question tonight is directed towards Senator Golden and Senator Krueger. I understand, Senator Krueger, you're on the minority party, and Senator Golden, you're on the majority.
Thank God.
Do you in the wrong party, though? That's the dilemma.
How would you see your parties accepting your views tonight, or would they be in favor, or would they not be, or and how are they different?
I believe both Senator Krueger and myself, and I'm not going to speak for Senator Krueger, but there's a discussion going on within the Assembly and within the Senate, and here within the City Council, there's a discussion going on. But I believe that many of our colleagues are leaning in the direction for this. They're just looking for, I believe, the details, the devil in the details, to make sure that the certain legislators that live in certain parts of the communities that are going to be impacted the most are somehow their fears are alleviated, and that there are some concerns, that their concerns are met. I think that's the issue.
You know,
that
it's
we have to look
interesting
at.
because the degree to which this is not only a New York City issue, but it's a regional issue. I went to the hearing of the Traffic Mitigation Commission, whatever it's called, up in Westchester County, and there were people there there were some elected officials from Rockland County saying, we don't have a one-seat ride from Rockland County. And there's a lot of police officers and teachers who live up in Rockland County, and they're saying, you know, in essence, you're adding an additional tax on us because we have no other options. So the people in the Transportation Commissioner of Westchester County testified and talked about how, because the people coming from New Jersey will have an offset, that the tolls that they pay on the Port Authority bridges will lower the amount that they pay in a congestion price, while the people coming from Westchester who come across the Harlem River bridges will not, which raises the question of tolling. So it's just to kind of add to the complexity of this issue and the importance of the issue. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Ariel Gomez. I attend Brooklyn College. My question is more for Senator Krueger and Mr. Sinclair. You've touched upon points that you see as problems with congestion pricing, but going further, what are some alternatives that have been proposed besides congestion pricing?
Well, one of the things that you have to realize is that a lot of the congestion is caused by a lack of capacity caused by people who disobey the law, double parked cars, taxi cabs that are driving around hailing, people that are blocking the box, for example. So we think there needs to be rigorous enforcement of already existing traffic laws so that you get those vehicles out of the way and you can increase capacity. That would help increase vehicle speeds. There's lots of new construction going on these days in the city of New York. We think there should be a requirement where there'll be loading docks off street where vehicles that are coming, trucks that are coming to make deliveries, can go off street to drop off their goods. We think also that this idea that, I forget what the numbers are, but it's in the tens of thousands, I think, of people that get these placards that are able to come in and drive and park anywhere they want. We think that needs to be eliminated. There needs to be some sort of electronic messaging system, as has been instituted on Northern State Parkway, that could give drivers information about the best routes to travel. You should have incentivized delivering freight during overnight hours. That would take a lot of the trucks off the road. You should offer encouragement for people to use their bicycles, expand ferry service. Those sort of things we think are viable alternatives than to charge people to drive into the city.
And I would add to that, you can do those plus congestion pricing. HOV lanes would be a fabulous thing to discourage people from driving into the city just as single people in cars. After 9/11, we required multiple people in cars or a higher fee if they didn't have them coming across the tunnels and the bridges. And we saw an immediate response in Lower Manhattan and throughout Midtown. So I'm a big supporter of HOV lanes and would like that explored. I also think that exploring trucks going into commercial districts in the evenings or the early morning hours and getting fewer trucks off of our streets is a major win for all of us.
I agree.
I also believe that the 10,000 estimated trucks that come through Manhattan, what they call is just pass-throughs every day, don't have pickups or deliveries in Manhattan, are just cutting through. We actually should incentivize perhaps through lower tolls for them to avoid Manhattan instead of charging them more. Somehow keep these trucks out of Manhattan. But I think we have to do all of this. And I just also want to add, because you're all young people, this is a global warming issue, and we have to, even though Mr. Sinclair made the point about only X percentage of our pollution is coming from cars, we might disagree on this, but if the AAA's #1 priority isn't improved improved mileage and standards for our cars, we all flunk the test. So we're always going to have cars, at least in our lifetimes, but we better make sure that we're decreasing the pollution coming out of
And
them.
green buildings are in this. Green buildings are in this plan as well, and something that we really got to take a look at. But you already have a number of days that we can't come into the city when we have the UN is here. The number of days you shouldn't come into the city because of the Christmas holidays. So there's already a number of days that you got up on that board coming on the Northern Parkway. New York City closed. I mean, we can't do that. We have to find a way of keeping the city open.
This is the old Yogi Berra line. Nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded.
Right.
So yes.
Hi, my name is Brendan calling from Brooklyn College, and my question's for Mr. Sinclair. I'm a little bit confused about the posture you're taking on this plan where you don't support it because you feel it overburdens those of your constituents who make around $40,000 a year, and then again you also don't support it because it's watered down and doesn't charge enough. But specifically, I'm wondering, when you're talking about communities in the outer boroughs where maybe the median income might be $40,000, how many of those people do you think really go into the city and then pay for parking at what parking costs in the central business district? I don't imagine that it's a lot of people making around $40,000 who do that.
Well, to clear up your confusion, we think that the plan as constituted will not work. It's not the idea that we support it being higher. We think that it's been so watered down as to be ineffective, and certainly the studies have shown that, that where you're only going to get an increase of 0.6 of 1 mile per hour in the speed that cars traveling through that area are going to see, we don't think it's going to work. That for it to work, you probably have to charge $25 for a car to go in, and maybe $30 or $40 for a truck. Now, we know that that's a political non-starter. No elected official would get behind that idea, and because of that, they're watering it down with all these exemptions and what have you for taxis and black cars, and you pay the toll, you don't have to pay the congestion pricing fee, to the point where it's not going to be effective. Now, the idea that the people who are driving into Manhattan are going to be able to pay for the parking, and the ones that are coming from Southeast Queens can't afford to do that, I don't have the numbers to show that. The state DOT study didn't talk about income as far as people being able to pay for parking. It talked about income in the areas where people are coming from. So, you know, what's going to happen with that, we don't know. Certainly the parking garages aren't in favor of this idea.
Yes, sir. Quick question.
Yes, my name is Greg Harris, and I'm currently a political science major attending Queens College. And my question is really directed towards Professor Chen. And you said a comment earlier really relating to people of different income levels, how people in the higher income level really are in favor of the plan, while people in the $40,000 range would suggest proposals to the policy. What kind of proposals do they suggest in the studies that you might have taken and examined?
In the studies that we have been looking at, what we found is that people with more flexible schedule, people with higher income are more willing to pay for it. Right. And but they do get benefits. That it's not like we are entirely sacrificing the auto drivers. These auto drivers, they pay for it and they expect to save travel time. That's a benefit we see. We also see people with lower income or with a more fixed schedule that they are more willing to change to public transit, to alternative modes. And I just want to add one thing in response to one comment made by Mr. Sinclair, is that you made a comment in terms of increasing the vehicle speed. Now, I want to make sure that we all understand that congestion pricing is not really about increasing vehicle speed at all. It's really to improve our accessibility to destination, because most of us travel in order to do activities at the destination. So you could have a very high speed but very poor accessibility. And I think that's where the public transit picture comes in, that we have studies found that public transit is very effective in high density areas.
Well, I talked about the increased speed because generally that's the measure in looking at how bad congestion is from the studies that we've seen. If there are fewer cars, that mean the traffic that is there will be able to move more quickly.
Right. So my point is that congestion per se is not a bad thing, really, and that it only becomes a bad thing if it significantly increases the cost of moving people and the cost. So that's...
Let me ask, since this is in the early stages of a debate that's going to go on for some period of time, we only have about 30 seconds left.
We're going to vote on this March 31st, so we're through that.
Do you believe that the plan will essentially look like what it is? I only have take a really quick 10-second answer.
I believe that the process, we've gone through most of the process. There is still some more devil in the detail, but I believe that we're going to be ready to vote by March 31st in this program, and I believe there will be a vote, and I believe it'll be a positive vote. It will happen.
I hope that we have quite a few changes in the plan as it was outlined to date. The problem is we don't have a real plan, so I'm waiting for the Commission to come out with an actual plan. I hope it's going to take into account many of our recommendations, and I hope we're going to pass it.
Let me thank everybody. I'm getting the goodbye sign, and I always make deadlines. And I think this is a very spirited conversation. I think we get some sense of the incredible complexity of transportation as it affects so many other areas. I want to thank you. We'll see you next time on the CUNY Forum.
Thank you.